Hello crypto friends, welcome back to the channel. So as right now the stock market is experiencing a pullback. We are starting to see some correction within the overall market, but Bitcoin remains strong. Yesterday I got an interesting question by Nick Devereaux. Nick has been a long time subscriber, follower, friend, and he actually had a really interesting question. He basically stated, Edward, aren't you worried that Bitcoin will end up crashing since you believe that it is strongly correlated with the equities market, traditional market, stock market, and how he believes that there's going to be this inevitable depression within the next 10 years, right? I guess due to the circumstances with the coronavirus, the fact that we don't have a vaccine just yet, a lot of unemployment, right? We're seeing about 30% unemployment within the past just 2 months alone, which is pretty crazy. And a few other factors, right? Businesses going out of business and just companies not really making revenues, right? So it's understandable why we would be possibly going into a long-term depression due to all these factors. But personally, I have a different outlook. I think that for the time being, right, as right now, I go day by day, I think that there could be actually a possible pump incoming, or at least a continuation with this rally that we've been experiencing since the correction. All right, so I'll get into that more. Just stay tuned. So again, if you haven't probably been paying attention to the Federal Reserve or the markets or whatever, recently the Federal Reserve implemented what's known as negative interest rates. All right, if you want a complete detailed information regarding what interest rates or negative interest rates are, I recommend you guys check out Graham Stephan's channel. He did post a video in a lot better detail than I will ever explain it. Basically explaining what negative interest rates are, how it affects the markets, and what the general idea about that is. But just to give you guys a quick glimpse, essentially it is when the bank, instead of the bank loaning you money, you loan the bank money. All right, and then you earn interest on that. That's what's known as a negative interest rates, right? So it's like a reverse Uno card. It goes the other way around. And the idea behind that is that when you invest into bonds, which is essentially what you're doing, and eventually when you earn interest off that, that money's then being taken into the stock market, right? It is then being invested into other companies that are in dire need of some money, some cash flow, in order to sustain their businesses during harsh time periods, right? And so that is the general idea why you would invest into bonds. It's since it is the government's giving out these loans. I'm sorry, this payback solution, whatever then it is a lot safer than investing it straight into the stock market. So that is the general idea behind these negative interest rates. So how would that affect Bitcoin, right? Because honestly, Bitcoin, relatively has remained really, really strong, right? We've only seen huge price action, especially even today, right? Just today alone, it's up almost 3%, yet the S&P 500 is actually down almost 2%. So what I want to share with you guys today is my personal outlook within Bitcoin, and possibly, a shift in perspective within the stock market and Bitcoin, right? Are we starting to decouple, or what's going on here? But there is some interesting price action that I am noting right now. Okay, so let's start with the S&P 500, and then we'll go over into Bitcoin, and then we'll make our way back and I guess end up concluding it. But for the time being, in terms of overall direction within Bitcoin and the S&P 500, it's been pretty much similar, right? We've had this V-shaped bottom out formation. The difference is, of course, in how much percentage there has been, right? The S&P 500 has kind of failed to cross above that 200 exponential moving average, and as you can see, it's almost rejected it. But for me personally, I think that this could, for the time being, this could actually even be temporary. All right, I'm still kind of bullish, or at least have a bullish outlook, that this could possibly end up even forming what's known as a higher low of some sorts, and then eventually end up pumping back up. The reason I say that is right now, currently, the overall sentiment of the markets, again, given the market conditions, a lot of people are still extremely bearish on the markets. But based on the information that I gave you with the negative interest rates, and not to mention something I haven't mentioned before, is that right now a lot of people are net short on the S&P 500. They do believe that since it's going to be going down, They want to make money as it goes down, which understandable. But what happens is that when you accumulate enough shorts, you eventually end up getting what's known as a short squeeze, right? And that's actually what kind of happened the past few months. You know, ever since we were anticipating, right? This crash right here wasn't even based off these statistics. It was more off of anticipation, right? So based off this anticipation, we had such a huge sell-off, you know, pretty much with the entire market. But once we accumulated enough shorts, we were able to get a pretty big short squeeze. And so it really wouldn't surprise me if we were to establish what's known as a lower high within the markets, that we could actually end up even seeing a continuation onwards from that point on. At least that would be the ideal formation. And if we go back to Bitcoin personally, again, the reason I still remain long in my positions is that overall Bitcoin has actually broken pretty much through almost every single barrier. And this is something I did cover in yesterday's video regarding why I'm bullish on Bitcoin, post Bitcoin halving video. I recommend you guys check it out. But essentially, you know, as long as we remain above that 200 exponential moving average, for me, I think Bitcoin still has and remains pretty bullish. All right. Ideally, though, I would like to see Bitcoin get above that 10,500 range, because currently it is still netting what's known as a lower high, right? So consecutive, you know, lower highs. And if that remains true, then at that point it could be a possibility that we could end up actually pulling back. But for the time being, as long as we do remain above that 8,000 range, right, above 8,000, then I'm still, you know, predominantly really bullish regardless of the circumstance going on with the stock market. So am I worried with what's going on with traditional markets? Sure. You know, sure, I'm definitely keeping an eye on it because we could definitely experience a pretty major pullback. But I'm not as worried as I think a lot of people should be. All right. I think, you know, as the saying goes, invest when other people are bearish or whatever, you know, when there's blood in the streets, and buy when people are greedy. You know, you guys get the idea, right? That Warren Buffett reference, I just completely butchered it. So I'm not really necessarily worried because the overall sentiment, even with Bitcoin being up here, is still very negative. And this is something I did cover in my live stream, was that I think a lot of people are still wishing for Bitcoin to pull back quite tremendously, right? They want to see Bitcoin go back to 5,000, 4,000 or whatever, because frankly, you know, they didn't end up buying that bottom. And I mean, for me personally, I didn't buy it either. I didn't buy the bottom, but I did end up trading pretty much the overall trend and did catch a nice solid entry. And to me, that's most important, right? Catching uptrends, not catching bottoms. And so I'm not really concerned about, you know, hoping that Bitcoin goes down. It can still do that. And again, keeping an eye on the S&P 500 and on bonds and the overall sentiment in the markets. You know, I'm definitely going to keep a close eye to see how things end up formulating. But for the time being, I'd still see no change regardless of the circumstances outside the markets. Something you guys have to remember, guys, the markets has a mind of its own. It does not do what everybody wants it to do. So if a lot of people expect the markets to pull back down or crash really hard, there's a really good chance it's not going to happen, right? When the 2008 crash happened, you know, a few years back, all right, over a decade ago, you know, a lot of people were expecting huge rallies. They were expecting continuation after continuation. They weren't expecting the market to necessarily see that huge crash that we did end up having. Why? Because at the time, you know, people were still extremely optimistic. Right now, people are anticipating a crash. And so when we are seeing extreme pessimism, then again, we see a vice versa in that. All right. So I guess just to summarize my point, guys, I'm still pretty bullish on Bitcoin. I still think that right now is still a pretty good opportunity, as long as we remain above that 8,000 range, to remain long. And even if Bitcoin ends up by some means, shape or form breaking below that, you know, I'm still going to be in profit, guys. I did get a nice solid entry and I have been trading here and there. So regardless of the circumstances, you know, I'm not worried. So I just want to hear your thoughts below. You know, do you guys agree or disagree with my outlook? Do you guys think that the Federal Reserve and the negative interest rates will possibly prop up the markets into another pump? Or do you guys think that it's going to be one big old facade, that's what I meant to say, facade, and that it's just going to end up crashing us and end up going lower, right? I'll probably leave a poll in the top right corner for you guys to answer that as well. And yeah, I really want to hear your thoughts, guys, on that. So with that being said, I'll see you guys on the next one.